So good evening. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. I'm Kimra McAfee, Executive Director of Alpine Watershed Group, and I know that there are many virtual meetings to choose from these days and nights, so we're really happy to have you here for this continuing community conversation. Here's our agenda for this evening. Most of our presenters are going to share their own screens so that they can advance their own slides. But Watershed Program Manager Mo Loden is behind the scenes to help make everything hopefully go smoothly. And before I turn it over to Cindy Wise, I wanted to give a brief update on some of Alpine Watershed Group's activities. Looking at who's here tonight, I believe everyone here knows our mission and knows our coverage of the headwaters of 5 watersheds and our program areas. As you can imagine, it's been a different year for our organization, and unfortunately, we will not be able to host our usual Creek Day Community Work Day this month. But we're very pleased that we were able to have our long-term river monitoring volunteers resume collecting water quality monitoring data last month. And Mo is organizing the next data collection for later this week with our core volunteers. We've also been able to move forward with our largest restoration work to date, and that's bank stabilization at 2 sites in Hope Valley. And that is scheduled to start construction later this month. And if you go to our website homepage, there's a flyer. If you haven't been to Grover Hot Springs State Park lately, the new ADA accessible trail is complete, and we are very proud of the new interpretive signage. So please go check it out. And then moving on to future projects or project, there's 3 projects that are going to be happening hopefully in the coming years along Markleyville Creek in downtown Markleyville. Caltrans is going to be replacing the bridge on Highway 89, and Markleyville Public Utility District will be upgrading the sewer infrastructure. And then at long last, our long planned for floodplain restoration project will be happening. So while we aren't hosting public work days, we hope you'll stay connected with us virtually. So mark your calendar for our next virtual forum. That's going to be a continuation of tonight's discussion. We'll have the U.S. Forest Service talking about U.S. Forest Service roads. Their staff is busy with fires tonight, and so that's why they couldn't present. We also are going to have presenters on completed and planned restoration projects in the West Fork Carson River watershed. I think everyone here gets our newsletter. If you don't, please sign up. And if you're on social media, please follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And then I am now going to hand it off to Cindy Wise of the Lahontan Regional Water Quality Control Board.
Okay, I am going to wait just a moment here because Mo is going to drive the, or Mike, somebody is going to share the screen here for me.
Yeah, I'm going to do it for you, Cindy.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
Yeah.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. As Cameron mentioned, I am Cindy Wise with the California Regional Water Quality Control Board, the Lahontan region. And I will be joined a little later in the presentation by my friend and colleague, Mike Hanks, State Water Resources Control Board. And tonight, we're going to give you an update on our West Fork Carson Vision Project with a focus on the roads element. And before we get started, I wanted to give a special thanks to both Kimra and Mo with the Alpine Watershed Group for all their help and ideas, both for tonight and throughout our project. So next slide. Just as a quick overview of what we're going to talk about tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about water quality in the West Fork Carson. Then I'll explain how we're going to use a vision plan to address water quality impairments in the river. Then Mike is going to talk about his culvert assessment project. And then we'll close with talking a little bit about what our next steps will be. Okay, next slide, please. The primary responsibility for the protection of water quality in the state resides with both the state Water Resources Control Board and the Regional Water Quality Control, and the 9 Regional Water Quality Control Boards. The state board sets the policy for implementing state and federal law and also regulates water quality. And the regional boards adopt and implement water quality control plans or basin plans, which recognize the differences in regional water quality throughout the state, and also has differences in beneficial uses and water quality problems that are associated with different activities around the state. And our basin plan is an important tool that guides most of what the regional boards do for water quality. So next slide, please. Our basin plan assigns beneficial uses to waters in the region, and some examples of that would be municipal use, recreational use, or cold water habitat as examples. And the basin plan also includes several different types of water quality objectives. These can be narrative, something like toxic and toxic amounts. It can be numeric, which would be more like shall not exceed pH level of 7. They can apply region-wide, or they can apply site-specifically, watershed by watershed. And the water quality objectives are what we use to assess whether or not a water body is impaired. So next slide, please. This is a process that shows how we determine our impairment. So we would take our water quality data along with data collected by other entities, such as the Alpine Watershed Group, and we assess that data against the surface water objectives in our basin plan. And if the data shows that the water quality objectives are exceeded or are not being met, we are required to place the water body on the Federal Clean Water Act 303 B list. So if it does not meet the objectives, it becomes what we call a listed or impaired water. And if it meets the objectives, then we don't list it. And once the water body is on the 303 B list, we're required by Federal Clean Water Act law to address the impairment. And this has often been done to date by developing a total maximum daily load, or a TMDL, which is a water quality restoration plan. It can be a quite expensive, resource-intensive undertaking, and it can also take a long time, because once the plan's done, it has to be adopted into our basin plan, which is a year-long process generally in of itself. But there also is an opportunity to use a different kind of restoration plan, which I'll talk more about in just a minute. So next slide, please. When we evaluated in our most recent assessment in 2018, so West Fort Carson, we divided the river into 3 segments to evaluate the water quality based on existing common land uses. So what we did was split the river into an upper, middle, and lower segment. This is different than we've done in years past, but this is the most current method that we're using. So the first reach is headwaters to the east end of Hope Valley, then Hope Valley to Woodford, and Woodford's to the Nevada state line. And listed up there are the constituents that did not meet the objectives in our most recent assessment. So you could see that there's some, like nitrates, that are common to all of the segments. And then as you move downstream from upper to lower, there are more constituents that are considered to be. So next slide, please. So why do we care about these 303 delistings? And what this slide shows are some of the potential consequences of the listing. For example, excess nitrogen and phosphorus can cause biostimulatory effects. It can lead to an overproduction of plant growth, which in some cases can lead to hazardous algal blooms. This picture shows one that occurred a year ago, last summer on Red Lakes. It also result in low dissolved oxygen. Indicator bacteria, which the lowest reach of the river indicated was impaired, can have human health effects for water contact recreation, for example. And turbidity can have impacts to municipal use, but also for aquatic habitat. So next slide, please. Some of the possible sources of these pollutants in the West Fort Carson are listed on this slide. Our goal is to identify what some of these sources of pollutants are so that we can move to the next step, which is opportunity to improve. And to do this, rather than use a total maximum daily load or TMDL, we're developing an alternative restoration plan, which we're calling a vision plan. So next slide, please. So West Fort Carson is one of two watersheds in our region that we're using as our vision watersheds. The other one is to address bacteria issues in Bishop Creek. So next slide, please. So what is a vision project? It's a new term, relatively new terminology. It's been around for probably 7-8 years that the US EPA came up with. And basically what it is an alternative to using a TMDL, but still getting to improved water quality. So it's a watershed-wide planning effort that focuses on improving water quality and can take, hopefully, less time than it would to develop, adopt, and implement a TMDL. And a vision project, it looks beyond those like traditional TMDLs, and it really focuses on collaboration with willing stakeholders to implement actions that can improve water quality. There is, however, a backstop that once the vision plan is completed, if there are not measurable improvements in water quality, US EPA can, in the end, ask us to develop a TMDL to address water quality. So next slide, please. We identified the West Fort Carson as a good candidate for a vision project because there are a lot of dynamic restoration projects that are in the works in the watershed. There's also a high level of stakeholder involvement, both through the Alpine Watershed Group and other groups such as Friends of Hope Valley. And we also had a robust set of data that already was characterizing water quality in the watershed. And next slide, please. There were a lot of detailed information that was already well recorded and captured about the watershed. And this information kind of lays the groundwork for developing the vision project. And our job then becomes sort of filling in the holes with these sorts of assessment and planning documents to come up with a comprehensive watershed plan approach for the Carson. The two documents up here are, one is the 2004 Upper Carson River Watershed Stream Corridor Condition Assessment, which was paid in part by state board grant funds. And it did lay kind of the groundwork for a lot of the restoration work that is planned and underway, because it characterized priority segments of the river that needed some work. Also, the Carson River Watershed Adaptive Stewardship Plan, which was developed in cooperation between the Carson River Coalition and the Carson Waters Conservancy District, is a very comprehensive watershed plan for the Carson River in its whole in both California and Nevada, West Fork and East Fork. However, there were some parts of it that did not have as much information for the West Fork Carson as we had hoped. So moving on to the next slide, please. The US EPA considered the Subconservancy's Adaptive Watershed Stewardship Plan to meet all of its 9 elements of a comprehensive watershed plan, but only for the state of Nevada. Once a plan meets this 9-element standard, it becomes eligible for technical assistance and different types of funding once the 9-element plan has been approved. So again, US EPA approved the plan, both its original 2007 version along with the 2017 supplement as an approved plan for the state of Nevada, but not for the state of California. So next slide, please. So our hope is that in developing the vision plan, which will lay out a plan to address the impairments in the watershed, it will also meet the qualifications of a 9-element watershed plan. So the information that we're planning to develop for the vision plan, along with what's already been developed as the Carson River Watershed Adaptive Stewardship Plan, will together be a 9-element plan for the West Fork Carson and potentially open the door for US EPA 319 grant funding. Now, what I would like to do is to switch over to Mike Hanks, who will focus on the many road crossings in the watershed and how we're evaluating those crossings as potential sources of impairment in the watershed. So, Mike, take it away.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
You sound good, Mike.
Yep.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Hi, my name is Mike Hanks. I'm an environmental scientist at the State Water Resources Control Board, non-point source unit. I started helping Cindy and the Lahontan Regional Water Quality Control Board with some of their watershed characterization a few years ago, and eventually wound up helping develop a field assessment methodology to find sources of impairment at stream road crossings throughout the West Fork Carson River watershed. This field assessment methodology worked by identifying stream crossings through GIS analysis, preparing in-office investigations, kind of pre-investigations of the stream crossings, using available literature to develop methodology for actual field assessments, going out and conducting the field assessments, analyzing and working with the results back in the office, and then identifying stream crossings with a high likelihood of failure during a 100-year storm event. So first, a coworker and I started by identifying stream crossings by looking at GIS maps and looking at highways, county roads, Forest Service roads, and trails in the West Fork Carson River, and intersecting those with streams. And once we had the locations of all those intersections, we would take the latitude and longitude and upload those into mobile enabled maps and create a guide of what sites we wanted to visit in what order, so that we could go out and sample each of these locations. I believe in total, just from memory, there were about 130 stream road crossings in the West Fork Carson River watershed. This slide's got a couple maps. On the left, you're going to see the 2018 integrated report resegmentation of the West Fork Carson River, just to give you a overview of what we're looking at. And then on the right, we have a map. It might be a little bit too detailed for a PowerPoint presentation, but what it's trying to show you is blue lines representing streams throughout the West Fork Carson River watershed. Red lines representing the highways throughout the watershed, orange lines representing county roads, and then green and greenish lines representing trails and Forest Service roads. And so at each of the intersections between the blue lines and the rest of the lines, you'll see tiny little crosses that barely are visible on a PowerPoint presentation. But yeah, once we had all these mapped out, we came up with a methodology of how to sample each of these sites. We came up with field data sheets to take with us. These were developed by looking at methodologies using CAL FIRES, designing watercourse crossings for passage, 100-year flood flows, wood, and sediment, specific watershed associations, Handbook for forest, ranch, and rural roads, and North Atlantic Aquatic Connectivity Collaboratives, stream crossing survey data forms. And so in each of these forms, we wanted note the site, location, when we were there, but also note what kind of outlet we're dealing with. So the shape of the outlet, the structure, the material that it's made out of, the dimensions, if they're measurable. Some of these sites were not safe for my coworker and I to go out and actually measure because it's a moving stream. And so, just what we could only sample some of them. We also wanted to note whether or not outlets were armored, take stock of the inlet and outlet condition, the size of the culvert, comparison to the stream channel, and then just a lot of notes on what was going on qualitatively at the stream road crossing, just because each stream road crossing is different. So on this slide here is an indicative of a lot of the stream road crossings that we were able to sample in the West Fork Carson River. This one's doing pretty good. The culvert this box culvert looks adequately sized. The condition is good. You can even see on the bottom right-hand corner, I believe like there's some baffles or walls. So there's presence of BMPs to prevent erosion into the stream at this site. And so we did find a lot of stream road crossings to be adequate qualitatively for a 100-year storm event. But that's not the case at all stream crossings in West Fork Carson River. This circular concrete culvert, for example, has a lot of fill inside of it, or a lot of plugging. There's a lot of debris plugging as well, and even plants growing inside the culvert, which if this culvert was hit by a 100-year storm event, we would question how successful it would be during that event and whether or not it would fail. So to date, we've done about, I want to say 80-ish stream road crossing assessments. We have completed all accessible highway and county road stream road crossings. There's a few county roads that are not accessible by vehicle or they're fenced off. And so, yeah, so everything that is actually feasible for us to do, we've been able to do for county roads and highways. You can look here on the bottom left, you can see we go out and take like either Google Earth or Google Street View images of the site, try to get as much information as possible because some of these are hard to spot in the field, and then drive out and photograph the inlet, the outlet condition, what it looked upland of the culvert, what it looked downward, and then also get images of the stream road crossing relative to the road. So just take pictures of up the road and down the road. Yeah. So we've kind of talked a little bit about some of the qualitative indicators of failure. That is one assessment that we're doing. So that's what I was talking about earlier about whether or not a culvert might fail if there's a certain percentage of the culvert filled with sediment or debris, if the culvert is damaged, or if the culvert is collapsed or partially collapsed. We did know that. But for the culverts where we were able to measure the dimensions, especially in circular culverts. We're hoping to do a quantitative indicator of failure. We can do this by using the rational method or the revised USGS regional regression equations to determine nomographs for culvert sizings to determine the appropriate culvert size for a 100-year storm event. So basically, in layman's terms, you get what the precipitation would be for the area during a 100-year storm event. You take the size of the culvert you found in the field, and then you calculate the upland flow of the water at that point, and then you can see whether or not that culvert would be appropriately sized. And so we are still working on this part. Due to COVID-19, we have yet to be able to go out and assess forest service roads and trails. And then also, partially due to COVID-19, we have staffing reductions and furloughs for our staff. And so we have yet to be able to complete this section of the work, but we hope to be able to do it soon. So far, without showing you all the data that we've collected, I think this is the easiest way to communicate our results so far. We've found 21 stream road crossings in the West Fork Carson River watershed that would be at a risk for failure during a 100-year storm event. This is only based on the qualitative data that we were able to find in the field. And so many or all of these sites, which you can see are distributed throughout the watershed, would probably have something going on with them where either the culvert was collapsed, partially damaged, plugged with sediment, plugged with debris, plugged with vegetation, vegetation growing in the culvert. Each of these have been marked as something to look at for potential failure. And I think that's my last slide. I'm gonna hand it back on over to Cindy, and I think she's gonna finish this out. Cindy, I think you're muted.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute here.
Yeah.
I just wanted to touch, thanks, Mike. I just wanted to touch quickly on some of our other efforts that we have been doing in the watershed. Mike has helped us out with a lot of land use mapping. We've also been cataloging different kinds of management measures that are either completed or underway. One example of that is the local area management plan that was a signed agreement between our board and Alpine County, which will look at septic tank development and potential impacts, which is a good way to look at potential impairments from nutrients and maybe from bacteria as well. There's also a lot of restoration work that is completed, planned, or underway. And that will be the focus of our meeting in November that Kimra talked about. There's also been some very focused public participation. This meeting tonight on roads. In November will be focused on restoration. After that, we'll look at recreation and then potentially ranching as the fourth public forum on the West Fork Carson Vision Project. We've also developed a website and an email subscription service, which you can find both of those at the link at the bottom of the page. And then just to close out here, next slide, please. Some of our next steps, as Mike explained, is looking to complete the culvert assessment study. We've had a few field season setbacks, as I'm sure many people in this meeting can appreciate. We'll start looking at evaluating more specifically impairments linked to different types of land use. And then we'll look at potential management measures to address those impairments. We'll have some continued focused stakeholder involvement. Our overall next step will be to write and finalize the vision plan by September of 2022. So we'll be looking for putting a public draft out towards the end of next year, 2021. Next slide, please. And that's it for us. If anyone has questions, I'm not sure about timing. If Kimra and Mo, if you want to take any questions now, or we want to wait until the end of all the presentations.
I think we could take a couple of questions now, especially since the vision plan is the overarching, tying everything together tonight. I do see that Brenda Hunt started to type something in the chat, so I'm not sure if Brenda had a question. You're welcome to either unmute and ask a question, or you can type in the chat and Mo or I can help facilitate that.
I was going to write it in the chat, but I will just ask it if that's okay. So Cindy, on your slide just before this one, you had talked about some of the next steps that you're going to be doing. And one of them was to look at impairments and look at identifying potential sources and management measures. And I was just curious how, because the stewardship plan does have some of that information in it. And I was just wondering if you're going to kind of if there's a way for you to, I guess for my purposes, it would be great if it was coordinated with what we have in there, or if there's some way that we can continue to communicate so that I know what you guys have come up with that's different from what my stewardship plan says, so that I can make sure that whatever we have is the same.
Definitely, we would build on the good base that you have already completed and coordinate with you moving forward. Some of it will just be to kind of get maybe some early buy-in from US EPA also, to make sure that if that is an approach that they would consider for the California side too. Because the way I look at it is it's more that we just may need to provide a little more site-specific detail to those same kinds of sources and management measures that you already have in the plan, in your plan.
Okay, that sounds good. As long as we keep talking, and
yeah,
I just don't want to have something different, obviously.
Right, and our overall goal with the vision plan is to have it be a standalone document, only because it needs to be that as a deliverable for, satisfying the equivalent to a TMDL. But we're planning to set it up in a way that each section of the standalone plan also feeds into what you have in the stewardship plan already.
Yeah, right now I think I would put it as a, it probably could be an appendices, or it could be replacing portions of the California section.
I don't know, like whatever. I mean, it's a ways down the road, yeah, for sure. But whatever would make it the most user-friendly way. I mean, it could be, like you said, an appendix that refers to sections in the plan, or there's sections in the plan that are, like you said, replaced by what we would put in the vision plan.
Yeah, yeah. Like you said, we can work that out later. But thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
It looks great, by the way, what you guys are doing. Thanks.
Thanks.
Okay, does anyone have any other questions, or shall we move on to our next presenter? I don't see anything in the chat. So now I would like to turn it over to Dawn Rogers. Dawn is a hydraulic engineer with Caltrans District 10, and we asked Caltrans if they could find someone to present who would speak to the roads more specifically that are managed by Caltrans. And Mike, you might need to stop screen share.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Let me see. Can you see my screen at all?
I see a bridge. Yes, now I see your presentation. Looks good, Don.
Okay. All right. Hello, everybody. I am Don Rogers from District 10 Engineers, or District 10 Hydraulic Engineers, part of Central Region Hydraulics. And I'd like to talk to you about our drainage restoration program, or at least our culvert system design, roads, and how it all impacts, and how we try to manage and maintain clean water discharge. So similar to Mike, Caltrans has a culvert inspection program, and it was created in 2005 to help to inventory and assess all of the state's culverts. And so Caltrans is on a mission to reach by 2023 to have all the culverts within the state to be assessed or investigated for the first time. And it's going to be a 5 to 7 year cycle, depending on the district's funds and the amount of culverts. District 10 is currently at about 64% as of August 5th. So we're pretty much on target to hit our goal this year. And we should be, like I said, hitting that maximum target by 2023. So the culverts that are assessed, they get a rating. Similar to Mike, you know, it's if there's joint misalignment, if there's clogging, pinholes in the invert, whatever it may be, whatever the kind of defects, they're reported on the culvert assessment report, and that's submitted to our maintenance engineering team, and they sort of go through them, and it's filtered out, and the culverts that they need the most are put on projects. Now, whether they are deemed for emergency projects, which is essentially a director's order, or if they can be put in a highway maintenance project or in a shop project or part of this state highway system management plan as part of the SB1, because SB1 wants us to reach a goal of 90% good or fair conditioned assets or culverts within the stretch. Some of the inspection techniques, if you can't reach to it, we got to find other means and methods, and one of the methods we use is using these rovers or robotic cameras. They put them down, like this is going down in a storm drain manhole. They push them through and they get to inspect the culverts. And we get photos like these, and these are some of the damages that we may see. So if most times the guys are down there, they're shining a light, they're looking down, they're trying to look for joint misalignments or rotted inverts or piping or whatever the failure may be. Sometimes we can't really see through, or we can't get through. And so the first image on the left is a good image of a failure at the crown, something had punctured through. A lot of times I see guardrails when the contractor goes in and installs guardrails. Sometimes they'll puncture through culverts, and that may not seem like an issue, especially if the culvert's not running at full flow. But that soil can come down, and next thing you know, you got this big triangular section of road that's just pulled in through this culvert, what we call as infiltration, and then collapse the whole road and jeopardize the structural integrity of the road. And so like a portion in the right, that's a collapsed culvert. So most likely would have seen a sinkhole or some sort of failure at the structure that might have really make us take a special look at this culvert. But in that culvert process, it goes through us, and then we look at, okay, what is next? Even for bridge replacements, culverts, bridge replacements, anything that a road goes through within state right away, we have to go through this big strenuous list of different things to check down. And one of the major ones for big streams is hydromodification. So we do not want to change the natural flows of the channels. That is our critical thing. We always try to mitigate runoff where we can. So we look at the existing conditions and then see how the project is going to change or affect it. And if 1 acre or more of impervious area is now draining to this channel, we have to do a rapid stability assessment, or RSA. RSA says, okay, you've done your due diligence, and you have to discharge in this channel. okay, what is the effects to the channel? And so then we have to look at the threshold drainage area, which the TDA is defined as the area draining to a location at least 20 channel widths downstream of the crossing. So if you went from the top of bank to the top of bank, that's one width. You go 20 times that, and we see the total effect of the channel. If you get any head cutting or some sort of bank or bed erosion, then most definitely we'll have to mitigate that one way or the other. But for culverts, we design for the 10 or 100-year frequency storms typically. For major freeways like 99 or I-5, big ones that get major traffic, then we'll look at the 25-year. It has to pass the 10 or 25, and it can't overtop at the 100-year storm event. So that means that on the inlet side, it's typically always submerged. There's always going to be a headwater, so it gives us a little more room for wiggle. And what we really like to look at is the outlet velocities, if there's any deep debris flow, and then how will maintenance take care of this culvert. So maintenance now, with all 12-inch culverts, they need to be upsized to an 18-inch minimum because they can't get a Vector truck and clean them out. And like Mike pointed out, there was a big debris buildup in that culvert, and maintenance needs to make sure that they're on top of that, because yeah, if a 100-year storm hits and our culvert washes out, that's not a minor issue. I mean, that whole road is gone. And if it's a major road like Interstate 5, that's detrimental. So we need to make sure that we are on top of maintenance and doing what we can to have efficient system. So for clean water, there is the Stormwater Best Management Handbook, and it pretty much gives you a menu of items you can use to have cleaner water discharged into the natural ground or into the channel or stream or whatever it may be. And they're different means and methods, and I had listed just a few of them. In the mountain counties where they're de-icing and using salts and sands, at DIs we'll try to install sand traps. Sand traps are pretty much just a standpipe with an elevated outlet pipe so that you can trap some of those large sediments and bypass the clean water. Otherwise, other things are infiltration or retention basins. Sometimes we use detention basins, and there again we have to catch that first flush they like to call it. It's that first inch or two of water that's carrying all those sediments and oils down. We try to capture that before it runs off. And typically, if we can't retain 2 25-year storm events for a 24-hour time period, then we have to have at least a bare minimum of the water quality volume, which is said that 85th percentile of a 24-hour normal storm event. I know it's a lot of mumbo jumbo, but this is pretty much saying do the bare minimum to make water, to make the water discharge a higher quality. And obviously, as Cindy pointed out, we do not do a direct discharge to any paired water body on the 303D list. We really try to make that a high priority. So the infiltration sand traps, those are types of permanent BMPs that we use. BMPs do take special maintenance, and a lot of times we don't have that maintenance power to kind of keep up with the implementation. Otherwise, they'd be all over the state. Because it does take additional manpower, we have to pick and choose when we use them. Otherwise, we kind of default to a retention basin system where we're still getting some retention of that net new impervious area. The net new impervious area is, well, now the definition has changed. It used to be if you build a road and you widen it 12 feet on either side, you now have 24 feet by the length that you have to retain. But what the new definition says, if you rip out a surface and you put it back, even if it's the same square footage, that is new. You disturbed the area, and now we have new service. You do have to treat that. You do have to take a look at it and prevent it from discharging into the channel. So Caltrans is very proactive in taking that step to have clean water outlet into any channels or any water body. And then in the urban settings and their specific locations, we do use trash bags and trash racks. Trash racks are put at the inlet location. So this on the bottom right is a trash rack or trash guard. And so for high debris flow, That's going to come down and it's going to plug that inlet. We're going to have that trash rack to kind of disperse it from getting lodged in there. Maintenance can clean it real quick and still allow water to go through. Trash bags, on the other hand, are mostly used in urban settings where you're getting a lot of trash flow into the storm drain lines. And then the outlet capture these trash, and the maintenance crews can pull it out and then dump it as necessary. And then lastly, on the left is an example of a sand trap. You can see there's a long standpipe, 8 feet deep, whereas 5 feet of that bottom portion is going to collect most of your particles. So the water is going to fill up there. The heavy particles are going to fall to the ground, and then the water is going to outlet in that 18-inch pipe. So retention and detention basins. I get it confused. The way I think about it is high school. When you have detention, you're not there forever. So detention basins are short-term, retention are long-term. They're good ways of cleaning water if you have the space. And also, as it says, control flood flows. So like detention basins, even though it does not retain the water for percolation into the ground, it allows discharge, direct discharge. What we'll do is put an outlet pipe that's elevated, similar to that sand trap, and it'll have a controlled flow outlet. So it's going to reduce your flow so that you don't overwhelm your downstream location. So that can be implemented in a portion where we have to do an RSA. These basins are large and wide, and they promote evapotranspiration, infiltration, and then the grassy swells and biomedia. It treats any particulates that go down on the ground. Again, the water quality volume needs to be a minimum of the 85th percentile of a 24-year storm event. And then for vectors, for mosquito issues, we try to promote 72-hour drawdown. Otherwise, we say 96 hours maximum, and you need to have concurrence for the local vector control. So the vector control will have to come up with a spraying plan so that we don't just breed mosquitoes and wreak havoc on the locals. And of course, the Regional Water Quality Board wants a minimum separation so we do not pollute that groundwater. And for the most case, we push for 10 feet, but we can go at a maximum, no more, no greater. That's the cutoff line of 5 feet, but 10 feet is everything we try to shoot for. So downstream, the outlet velocity is very critical because if you design a culvert improperly, you could have high outlet velocities. And high out velocities, they're going to have turbulence, eddying. It's going to erode that outlet soil, and that soil gets taken downstream and possibly into the channel. And sediment itself is a pollutant. So like we look at all aspects and try to make sure that we're doing our part to really improve the water quality. Some outlet energy dissipators are in stilling basins, drop structures, stilling wells, or most commonly we use flared in sections or rock slope protections. And those are kind of the typical things we use based off the outlet velocities. Some of the temporary BMPs, like during construction activities, are wattles. We try not to leave those long term, but if the RE doesn't push it or the contractor doesn't pull them out, sometimes they're left behind. But truly, they're only a temporary solution. But if they're left behind, I mean, it's not a huge deal if the netting, the plastic netting, is biodegradable. Sometimes you can use a biodegradable or it's a plastic netting. Gravel bags to protect DIs, filter fabrics. During construction, we use truck debris racks, truck wash racks, or heavy rock. And at those locations, they drive over them. We try to knock down any foreign soil so that it doesn't get tracked all over the roads and eventually deposit it into the local channel. And then for bank protection, to reduce the chance of slope failures and erosion due to rainwater runoff, we try to plant soil seeds or filter fabrics to kind of hold back and retain that soil. That's kind of in a nutshell what we do. But some of the lessons learned and the projects I've been involved in, I'd like to share with you that really helped me kind of open my eyes up to how to improve. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I wasn't here during the rock slide on Mariposa 140 as your way to Yosemite. The bank failed, but I was involved into a slope failure on Mariposa 49. Now here we did not have proper drainage. Upstream we had rolled dike and loose material which clogged all the DIs, and the water just poured over the top bank. And even the down drains that we had were poorly designed and did not adequately do its job to retain any runoff downhill, and it caused this major erosion. And although this is not directly involved into water quality, if it was not right next to the channel, most definitely that'll impact the local stream. So what we did here is we wrapped the whole bank in a jute mesh. It's like a burlap sack material. It kind of help promotes seed growth. It retains those plants so they can push the roots in and really hold back the soil. And on top of that, we used chain link fence as well as circular culverts. You can see before there were open-ended culverts and they got all beat up. These circular culverts are a little more stronger. They can withstand a little more flexibility and do its job properly. Again, this is another photo of that chain link fence held back, retained with soil nails, and then our down drains. Next, we had another project in just recently, 2020, was a sinkhole. Very interesting project. Now, what you don't see every day, which my boss has never seen, which I haven't seen record of, is a circular rock culvert. On that right-hand side is a circular hand-stacked culvert. Very rare, very awesome to see. And as mentioned before, those big rocks they left on the bottom, those are internal energy dissipators, which help to kind of reduce velocity within the culvert itself. But this was an issue because it's so old and it's been piecemealed together. A portion of this pipe had a misalignment. And so we were getting piping. What is piping is it's the water rolling through the side of the culvert. Water's rolling through the side of the culvert, and it went all the way down and caused a sinkhole. Now, this sinkhole, as you can see, was at the red dot, and it is a little ways away from that rock stack culvert. So we were thinking, okay, maybe it's that 18-inch. We inspected it, no, wasn't that it? So we decided to do a percolation test. We dumped 250 gallons of water, and it shot through in 4 minutes. And we went down into that rock stack culvert, and what do you know? It's coming out of the pipes, or out of the rock stack pipe itself. So here you can see the water just coming through the wall. Now, without our inspection crew, without seeing this, nobody would have believed it. But it's amazing the things we see. And this is bringing down soils, as you can tell, and it's going to pollute the water body, and it's going to pull down oils and whatever debris comes out of the cars. So very interesting to see. And lastly is the Ferguson Fire. That was a major issue, because after a fire, and a heavy storm hits, you're prone to mudslides and big debris fall. So we worked hard to try to account for that debris. But what we didn't account for was the damage the fire does to the existing culverts. Now, this was a plastic-lined culvert pipe. It was originally a corrugated metal pipe. It was lined with a plastic liner, and it wicked through. That once it caught fire, it burned all the way through. And once it burned through, it produced a byproduct. It's this nasty chemical stuff. And this was right off the Merced River. And if we had those plastic-lined culverts everywhere, man, I couldn't tell you what that water would be like. But just going on different culverts, this was a RCP, a concrete culvert. Looks the same as it did before. So thumbs up to that. This is another plastic culvert. These do not do well in forest fire prone areas, so we try to eliminate those. Again, this didn't get wicked all the way through and reduce that nasty byproduct, but this one did have a structural integrity issue and collapsed. And lastly was the culvert pipe, the CMP culvert pipe. In decent shape, they just don't last as long as the concrete pipes. So all in all, this is kind of what we do in regards to water and Caltrans and how it affects our roadways and how we go about it. I'm just learning, so always room to learn. But if you guys have any questions, I'm open for that.
Don, I guess my question is, going back to your initial slide on your progress on assessing culverts, is there a system in place where that information feeds to the regional board, or how would that work?
So we have down low is a hyperlink, and there's I think it's open to the public. I'll have to double check, but it's an online inventory that has everything assessed on it. It shows you, in the background image, you can kind of see it. It shows you where we at with inspections, how many culverts do we have in good shape, poor conditions, and where we at moving forward.
And does anyone else have any questions? Okay, Don, thank you so much. That was very interesting, and I really appreciate you translating engineer speak so that I hope everyone could understand. I definitely got a lot out of it.
Yeah, I did my best, sorry.
No, you did a great job. Next, we're going to turn it over to Zach Wood. And Zach, I'm not sure if you want to start by sharing your screen or you want me to be sharing a screen.
Hey, Kimra. Yeah, I'll share a screen first, and then you can show the content you have.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And I want to start off by introducing myself. I'm Zach Wood. I'm a planner with Alpine County Community Development. I really appreciate the presentation so far. You know, there's very few of us that are interested in the subject matter professionally, so when we're together, it's kind of a lucky opportunity. And then also having an audience like the Watershed group that appreciates the subject matter is helpful as well. So I think, you know, for technical issues, I'm not an engineer. I'm not a water quality expert either. So I'm just going to talk about the practical application of the county's stormwater program to our transportation system and how we do road maintenance related to stormwater. So, because I'm on another computer, of course, I'll be the one with the problems for making this work. Okay, well, I'll just go for now, and then Kimra, you can catch up. So I wish I just had Dawn's presentation again, because it had pretty much anything I would like to talk about. The reality with our county road maintenance department is it's very small. So there's half a dozen employees that do road maintenance. There's contract services for county engineering, and then there's just a couple staff in the office like myself. So I began working on transportation planning and GIS in about 2014-15, and the county created its first rapid style inventory of our road assets. So that included signage and encroachments, but it also included drainage features like culverts. So as we saw with the Caltrans program, we didn't know which kind of culverts we had, where they were, and our initial effort was just to go into the field, similar to what they described, and find them, take photos, and geolocate them using GIS. So when that field work is going on, we had to rely on the road maintenance department because they're always involved in these culverts. I think, you know, the underappreciated aspect of how transportation works statewide and locally is these culverts were designed by engineers, hopefully to just go 100 years without needing anything. But the reality is some of these culverts in our system, they need maintenance every year or more than once a year just to keep the water flowing and to keep the road condition from being damaged or destroyed. So what that means in terms of the ideal maintenance is you're always behind. You can never catch up and replace facilities that aren't totally failed. You can never catch up and do as much preventative maintenance as you'd like to do, simply because of the resources available. So Kimra had spoken to our road maintenance supervisor and learned what I've known through my whole career, which is because of the reduction in federal funds that are passed through to local entities, especially ones like Alpine County with a majority of public lands, our resources in terms of staffing used to be a dozen to 15 people, and there was full-time summer road maintenance crews that did grading and drainage work in a high mountain and backcountry roads, practically all year. So when you go from 15 individuals to 5, you just can't do as much, plainly. So the other thing that's a reality is, as I mentioned, most of the things that the road maintenance is working on is repairing damage from even a year, 2 or 3 years prior. So I'll just have Kimra, you can queue up that photo PDF that I sent, so we can kind of talk about recent events that occurred after the winter floods of 2017. So thanks to our inventory, so again, it was identifying all the culverts in the system. The regional board project is great because that really focuses on the primary culverts and drainage crossings when we're talking about interface with flowing water. But most of the drainage system in terms of culverts crossing the road is dry for the most part. The conveyances really don't move a lot of water and stay dry. But when you have a flood situation, and when you have half a foot of rain over a day, then all that starts running, and then you start to get damage. So Kimra can just flip through these photos because I think they tell the story, especially if you're familiar with the county. And the funny thing is, these aren't even like the good photos. That photos of the damage that were shared at the end of the Caltrans presentation reminded me a lot of Wolf Creek Road, where some fire impacted terrain then got a microburst of rain, and then that road was closed for 2 years because of the debris. So here's some situation right above that debris flow location on Wolf Creek, when you can see the upper left-hand corner there. So again, just the drainage couldn't handle the debris plus the water, so it fills up, overflows onto the road, and that's what starts to really, in this section, it still was paved, it takes a toll. So these other situations on the same page, they're on the bottom half, they are in the West Fork drainage. So that Diamond Valley photo example on the lower left-hand corner, we're actually in the middle of a FEMA project to upgrade that drainage due to the damage that's been reoccurring there with storm systems going forward. So again, damage in 2017, hopefully the repairs funded by FEMA will actually take place in 2021. Go ahead with the next set there, and you'll kind of see similar things here. So because it's very practical, you can see I can just go out and send these photos to the county engineer who's not local. So I have to use things like a hat to show what the significance of the damage is, or roads like the airport road example, where once the cutting starts into the road surface, you're lucky to get it stopped at that point and keep the road passable. So this has been the condition of the roads for the recent past, just because damage that looks so small in these photographs can take a week with a whole crew to repair correctly. And as we flip through here, like I'm saying, these are the highlights. So it's not everything that was required of the road department to get fixed. Yeah, I think more of the same. Anyone that's familiar with these roads, if you can picture the shoulder, usually being nice, and you could pull off there and take a photo. After these storms, we were having the road surface and the traveled way undercut, and we're losing the structural components of the road. So it doesn't seem so bad if you're just walking along the side, but when you think about driving along at speed, like that sinkhole that we just saw, that's not safe. So safety is always the number one priority for the road maintenance function. And, the point of the whole transportation system is to move people and goods. And if it fails, the safest thing to do is close the road. So that's always where, this becomes practical application, because if there's not enough resources to do the maintenance, if you have significant damage to the extent that you can't repair it, you're talking about closing the road. And I guess I got one other greatest hits here. Yes, so same with the FEMA repairs for that section of Airport Road in Diamond Valley. We're also doing some repairs on Hot Springs Road, as well as a full reconstruction of that road eventually. So many of those drainage problems and slopes like you see in the upper right-hand corner will hopefully be repaired. But the reality is, funding for road maintenance and construction just won't keep up. So you're always going to have situations where, you're looking out for a culvert blocked, like in the lower right-hand corner on Diamond Valley, just to get crews out there in enough time to avoid worse damage occurring. So that is kind of the short and sweet of it for me. I'm sorry I couldn't share the other images that I have, but I can send those around to anyone that's interested.
Thank you, Zach. Does anyone have any questions for Zach?
Maybe this is Cindy. Maybe Zach, if you could send the other images to the camera, and she can distribute them. I'd love to see them, and I'm sure other people would too.
Yeah, and what we have with the inventory info that you guys have prepared in Caltrans is, it is just an assessment of the locations. So we have geodata that shows where these culverts are with some attribute information, but we haven't really been able to do the assessment, and the judgment of, is this in good condition? Is it in fair condition? Because as we're benefited by and also cursed by, we have road department people that have worked longer than I've lived. So they carry around, the atlas and the conditions in their fastest computer between their ears. But that's also a problem, and one of the reasons we understood we needed to record and get more information, because eventually the same system that we saw from Caltrans, where they do annual inspection and base their work program off of it, is something that will have to happen here, when it's just not as intuitive as someone that's been doing the job for 3 decades.
I think the other interesting thing I learned in speaking with the road maintenance foreman, Dawn had mentioned the vacuum that they use to clean out culverts. And what I was told was that the county doesn't have a vacuum for cleaning out culverts. So they basically have to borrow a water truck from the fire department to blow out, to clean them out with water. And so it's another challenge to the maintenance department. Okay, if there's not,
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
So Zach, you had mentioned early on in your presentation that a lot of these culverts are ideally designed to not have to, get regular maintenance or regular checkups. I guess more or less regular maintenance. You said in our circumstances that's not necessarily the case. Is that due to do the culverts need more redesign in most situations, or is it due to special circumstances of fire and then rain events, or why are our culverts needing so much more maintenance and attention than what is intended?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the blessing for our area, as you heard from Caltrans, is they kind of have two, they have tons in District 10. There's a lot of different circumstances. There's the Central Valley, and then there's the Sierra. So in our case, because we typically don't have the problem of moving the water because of slopes, I think it really comes down to the age of the infrastructure. If you look at a road like Diamond Valley Road, it was constructed by Caltrans in the 50s and 60s as a federal aid secondary road. So again, the reality there is, just like those inspection photos and videos that we saw, I'm sure inside our system, from the view of like a rat, it would look, poorly maintained because it simply is 50 years old at least. So I think that's what we're coming up on, where, a lot of the historical construction techniques, they should be given a lot of credit because they've held up so well, but also, they probably won't last another 150 years.
I had a question too. This is Brenda. Hey, I was wondering, given, and this is kind of for Cindy too. So given the circumstances with the infrastructure being kind of all coming at the same time to be not in good shape, and the fact that you guys don't have any Vector trucks or anything along those lines, when this is all said and done, are those types of things able to be funded through the 319 or through any sort of other water quality, like Clean Water Act funding? Maybe that's a question for Cindy more than you, but it just brought that question to mind.
That is a good question. Thanks, Brenda. This is Cindy. I think a lot of it depends on what is really the focus of each grant program, because 319 non-point source program, over the years, it used to fund stormwater projects and such as Vector trucks, and now it does not fund any stormwater that is covered under a federal NPDES permit. But there has been, there has been other sources of funding, year to year, as California has different kinds of water bonds. For example, right now, they're probably the most current thing under the last water bond proposition. There was a big section of money that was set aside for stormwater improvement and maintenance. But that water bond is sunsetting, and I don't know what will be coming down the pike next. It's probably going to be a little while. But, there has been lots of talk prior to the pandemic about the need for infrastructure improvements. So that could be the focus of the next water bond. But I will say that if we identify this as a problem and a need, and we put it in our watershed plan, it will at least open the door for potential for 319 funding where there is not that potential right now. So I know that's not, it's probably not a satisfactory answer in all aspects. That's the only kind of answer I have right now.
Well, I think it's a good answer. I also just wanted to remind you that this is a small population, and so it doesn't meet the requirements to have an NPDES, I believe, permit. I know in Nevada it wouldn't meet the population I'm pretty sure the population standards are national. So that would be something where they wouldn't have the possibility of having a permit because their population is so small.
Right, and that is something that we would have to discuss for sure with US EPA, only because they might have a different Like they might have a different take on it if it was, for example, improvements on Caltrans roads where
Right.
they do have a permit
Right.
versus county roads where they do not, for example.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. All right, well, it's just a thank you for answering.
Sure.
Yeah.
I see that Ron has his hand raised. Do you have a question, Ron?
Yeah, it's a question and also a comment. In my 44 years here, I've lived through 12 100-year storms that I'm aware of. So obviously I'm older than I look. And if there's a little creek on my property, it's a seasonal creek, and you can step over it in a couple more weeks. But it actually went over the highway at 12 feet in 1997. It has 4-foot diameter cement culverts with metal inside, and it didn't do the job. So how are you going to do that on every place, on every spot? It just is going to be impossible to expect the 500-year flood and to build to that standard. There's going to be failures, and there's going to be drawbacks to what overbuild you do. And back to the Caltrans gentleman, is where do you make the choices of where the high priorities are is going to be the high transportation roads, which goes back to the other, I believe it was Cindy or Brenda's comment, that we're so small population. The roads or transportation system is for the tourist and the travelers here more than it is for the locals. So we're going to be in this quandary of how to fix this, and especially on the county roads in the backcountry. That's going to be very expensive to do. And unfortunately, I think Zach alluded to it, we're almost at a failure rate is when we're going to fix them. And we're going to have a disaster when they fail, and hopefully we can get FEMA to fix it. So that's kind of where the status is for us, and it's kind of unfortunate, but I really do appreciate the presentation, especially from Caltrans. I put in a few culverts in my professional life as well, and I really enjoyed looking at the plans then, but I like your plans better now. So thank you very much.
I will pass that on. I think Dawn might have dropped off the call, but it was really great to have Caltrans come to the table, and a nod to Warren Alford, our public information officer for District 10, who helped us get Dawn Rogers as the presenter.
And a nod to you, Kimra, for your charming persistence on the Caltrans information officer.
So I have one last slide to share to wrap this up. Let's see if I can get this to work. So as you know, we couldn't get the Forest Service here tonight, but Sally Champion, who's the hydrologist with the Forest Service and a great friend and liaison of Alpine Watershed Group, she asked me to just mention, kind of as a teaser for our next meeting, about the upcoming roadwork planned in Faith Valley in this area that's popular for dispersed camping. And this project will be part of the larger meadow restoration project that American Rivers is the lead on. And Waterways Consulting assessed the roads, and then they've been designing improvements that will help better manage drainage, reduce erosion, and reduce degradation of the road surface. And this road work will probably happen about exactly a year from now. It's scheduled to start in 2021, and they'll probably wait until after Labor Day weekend. So when we hear from the Forest Service at our November 10th meeting, they'll talk a little bit more about this project, but then they also should be looking at larger scale in the West Fork Carson River watershed. In 2013, they did an environmental assessment for a travel management plan for the West Carson River routes. And so we're very much hoping that they will fill us in on what actions have been taken since that planning effort. And that's all that I have this evening. Are there any more questions, comments, ideas for Cindy, Mike, Zach, or anyone else?
Just Thank you. From CWSD's perspective, this has been awesome, and it's really good to see all the work that's being done. I appreciate it for the vision plan and by you guys. Thanks.
I see that Rich Harvey has his hand up. Do you have a question, Rich? You have to mute yourself.
Oh, sorry. I was muted. Rich Harvey with the Watershed Group, and I just want to thank you, Kimmer, for putting together a really interesting presentation. I learned more about culverts and drainage and all the roads than I ever knew before. And I want to thank all the presenters. Thank you so much, and Don. It was very interesting to me, and great stuff. Thank you.
Thanks, Rich. I look forward to figuring out how our staff can really support the regional board and the state board. You know, we don't need to be the nag, but I know Brenda for many years now has been trying to get things moving forward so that that 319 funding can start to flow. And Cindy, I really appreciate you trying to find that door and open it for us. And I think the most important thing is that we find the priority projects where we're going to get the most bang for our buck, especially as dollars become harder and harder to come by. And I think that's definitely the era we're heading into as we get past COVID-19. So thank you everyone for the time this evening. And if you have any comments, questions, ideas for future meetings, please send them to Mo or me. And otherwise, have a good night.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great meeting.
Thank you, Ron.
Bye.
Have a good night.
Bye-bye.